Good evening. Great to see all of you. Wonderful to have you joining us online today, whoever's out there. We have one goal this evening in the next half an hour, and that is that your blood pressure and or your pulse rate drops significantly. We want you to be in that place where you are open, where the Spirit of God can speak to you, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that happens more in quiet times and in the sound of sheer silence, as we'll hear in the text today. But the whole theme of our Lenten series is to be centered, and to be centered on Christ, and to be centered on who we are as a follower of Christ, and then to be centered on what that's inviting us to do in the world. We've set up opportunities for you throughout the week and to kind of experience that in different ways. Obviously, Wednesday worship, noon, 7, Sunday morning worship. We also have a cross that you'll see on your way out today, and we're inviting people whenever they're in the building, if they have something that they would like to leave at the foot of the cross, some thoughts, some anxieties, something that they just feel like they just need to release from their being, you can just write it down on there, and just as a way for us to tangibly put some things at the foot of the cross. Back in the corner in the fireside lounge and in the chapel, there's a labyrinth, and if you've never done a labyrinth, it's a walking prayer, and it allows you to enter into that space, and you've kind of follow this winding path. The purpose of the winding path is for you to just start sort of relieving yourself of all the things that you're thinking through at the time, and it takes you to a center. And we hope that in the center you'll understand how deeply loved you are by the God of the universe. And then you get the chance to stand up from the center and move back out into the world. That's really the rhythm of life. It's that inward journey of releasing and discovering who you are as a child of God, and then entering back into the world that we've been given. The chapel's going to be open during before work and also throughout the day. So if you just want to step in there for a little while and say, you know what, I need to breathe a little bit, do it. Breathe a little bit. So all of those are ways for us to hopefully experience the gift of a God who has come to us in Jesus in this season and says, you are mine. You are mine. Dearly loved by God. There's going to be 2 hymns that we're going to sing. You'll see the words on the screen today. They're both familiar hymn tunes, so you'll pick them up pretty quickly, but there are different words in them that are very connected with the theme of the season. There's another piece of music that Sean's going to lead us into right after the reflection that will just sort of be another meditative way for us to experience the centering work that we hope that the Spirit of God is going to do in you and through you tonight. So let's begin with our first song.
Space within our thinking, lifting shades to show the sun, raising courage when we're shrinking, finding scope for faith begun. In the Spirit, let us travel, open to each other's pain. Let our loves and fears unravel, celebrate the space we gain. There's a place for deepest dreaming, there's a time for heart to care. In the Spirit's lively scheming, there is always room to spare.
Gracious and loving Spirit, create that space within us tonight, tomorrow, in the days that follow. In that space, fill us with your presence, and whether it's healing we need, whether it's reconciliation, whether it's encouragement, whether it's hope, whether it's confidence, whether it's a new direction, we're going to trust that you will lead and receive that gift beginning tonight. Amen. So each of the Wednesdays, we're going to look at another biblical character, and not big parts of their story, but just a little part of their story. Tonight we're going to look at Elijah. Let me give you a little background to Elijah. Elijah is one of the major prophets in the Old Testament. If you know a little bit about the tradition around Elijah, Elijah was thought to be a prophet who was whisked away in a fiery chariot at the end of his life, and so who never died. And the hope within Jewish tradition yet today is that even when they have a Seder, when they celebrate the Jewish Seder, they hope that there's a time when they open the door and they hope that Elijah will come back, because Elijah was the one who would just sort of mark the inauguration of the new kingdom and the new Messiah coming. And so Elijah has been just a massive part of the biblical tradition for the people of the Old Testament, the Hebrew people. And in this particular story, what's happened a couple chapters prior is that Elijah has had this massive conflict with the prophets of Baal. So you might think of the prophets of Baal as just prophets for the foreign gods, or the pagan gods as they would be described in the Old Testament. And so there's literally this crazy competition that they put together. Elijah won, and all of the prophets of Baal died. We'll look at that story some other time in some other place. It will not help your spirit tonight. But that set it up. And what happened then is that the king, who at the time, and his queen Jezebel, so King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, were not big fans of Elijah. In fact, they were big fans of the prophets of Baal. And so when they discovered that what Elijah had done, they wanted his head on a platter, so to speak. And so Elijah has to flee into the wilderness. When he flees into the wilderness, he has an encounter with God, and we're going to read just a few verses of that today. And what we're going to focus on is how he eventually hears what God is saying. How he eventually hears what God is saying. So we're in 1 Kings 19. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For all the Israelites have forsaken your covenant. They've thrown down the altars and they've killed the prophets with the sword. I alone am left." Elijah's thinking very well of himself right now. Like he's the only faithful person left in all of Israel. And And he goes on and says, I alone am left, and they are seeking my life, King Ahab and Jezebel, to take it away. And God said, I'd like you to go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. Other translations say a gentle whisper. And Elijah heard what God was saying. Isn't that remarkable? Now, there are other times in the Old Testament, as you know, and in the New Testament, where there have been massively dramatic ways that God has spoken to the people, but God is speaking here in sheer silence, in quiet. Let me ask you this. Have you ever sensed God saying anything to you in the quiet of your life? Have you ever known any encouragement in that time? We're going to walk through a little bit about one of the practices that I have that's been really important to me because I was not one who dealt well with quiet and silence in my life of faith. But I'm going to suggest today and invite you to consider a practice of intentional quiet and silence as part of the work that God is going to do in your life. Because in contrast with a lot of the chaos that we can experience in the world, you just have to turn on the news for a second and you'll know what I mean. That is maybe one of the most profound places where I believe God continued to speak to us. Let me give you a little parallel. Let me give you an analogy that might be helpful for you. This last week, I was able to do probably what will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. My daughter Siri, youngest daughter Siri, and her fiancé Jace sang solos at Carnegie Hall in a concert last Tuesday night. Amazing experience for us to go there. So we got there, we got the hotel kitty corner from Carnegie Hall. I don't know how many of you know Manhattan well or not, but it's just 7 blocks north of Times Square on 7th Avenue, and the hotel was 2 blocks south of Central Park. So that's where we were. First night we got there, as soon as we could put our stuff in the hotels, we got out there, we just ran down to Times Square, and you know what Times Square is like, right? So here's a couple of pictures just to give you a sense of the stuff. The first one was, here's a picture of Times Square, and this is actually right after we saw Hugh Jackman in The Music Man. And if you want to know how God speaks to my wife, it's through Hugh Jackman in The Music Man. That's how God was speaking in the last few days. But I just want you to kind of feel this picture for a second, right? I mean, the crowds pressing in on you, the cameras that are there, the noise you can imagine there, the smoke that's up there, the lights. And the lights, I just had forgotten when you get to Times Square how intense they are. And just the message, advertisement, message, buy, consume, be something different than you are, over and over and over again. And your body just starts to feel like this as you make your way down the streets. There were people selling CDs to us, trying to get us to promote whatever they're working on. There are people who came up to us and said, hey, you want to take a picture? Because they were in Tickle Me Elmo costumes, and we didn't realize that we had to pay them to take a picture. But you find these things out, but just the chaos of that experience as we took a right turn out of our hotel and went down into the Times Square area. Now, the next day, what we did is we took a left out of our hotel and we went to Central Park. Now just look at that for a second. All of the buildings around it. In the center, a place of life. And in contrast, to think about the asphalt and the concrete roads, what do you have in Central Park? You actually have grass that people are laying on. In contrast to the massive steel girders in the buildings that are built up for stories and stories, you have these massive trees and oaks that have been there for centuries, living through whatever the weather storms have taken them. And so you have lakes that are there, and in contrast to the chaos of people trying to clamor and get at you, you have kids playing off in the distance. That was the dissonance. That was the difference between those two experiences. On the one side, you had the noise and the energy and the chaos of Times Square and that movement. On the other side, you had Central Park. A place to sit is what we did, and to walk gently, and to make your way through. It was a place of space and quiet. I mean, I want you to just think about that as an analogy of the two parts of our lives. And I want to suggest that it is as critical for us, or maybe even more critical, to live that Central Park part of our lives, because many of us find ourselves in that other piece in some way or another all the time. Dallas Willard, who's been one of my favorite teachers of the spiritual life, said this about listening and about being quiet. He said, the still small voice, that voice that came to Elijah, or the interior or inner voice, is the preferred and most valuable form of individualized communication for God's purpose. Think about that. Let me ask you the question, do you want to hear something from God? I would suggest, at least invite you, to consider this to be a part of your life. How many of you are extroverted people? I can kind of see through the lights here a little bit. Yeah, maybe about a third of you. So you live more of my life than the other 2/3 of you live. I just believed that God only spoke to me through other people and through experiences that I could have for a long time. That's just how I lived my life. But there were points in my life when I completely ran dry. And I was fortunate to have people like Dallas Willard, when I connected with this through some of his books and then meeting him in person later, and others who taught me this whole sense of the inner life, the quiet life. And for an extrovert, this was hard work. It was really hard work. And I'm so far from where I'd like to be, I think. And yet it's such critical work for me. It's the place where I find restoration. It's the place where I can actually listen in a more tangible way. So let me just walk you through what I do. Not to say that you have to do it this way, but it's the way that I think about this process. So I started small, and it's grown over time. But I literally just have to carve out a space, a physical space in my house or in my workplace where I can be as quiet as I can be. And I get there, and the only way that I figured out that I couldn't like think about a word necessarily, but I just had to focus on my breathing. That was the only way I could kind of calm myself down enough with all my thoughts. And so you just went through, and I would, for the first many, many times that I did this, I literally just breathed for however many minutes I was sitting there and tried to just focus on breathing in and breathing out. Down the road, I added words to it that were helpful, like breath of God, renew my life, or breath of God, forgive my sin, depending on where I was. Breath of God, give me hope. So it was that sort of an add-on to that as I moved into it. And then once I figure out I've settled into a somewhat of a quieter place, then I just sit. And you know what the product of it is? Sometimes nothing. And it will drive you crazy. If you're a produce kind of person, I've got to produce something, in order for it to be a legit experience. No. What happens is sometimes I will sit there and not one thing will apparently have happened. But how I wrap my mind around that now is that if God is a God who desires to be in relationship with me and with you individually, and I believe that to be true, if this God is a God who desires to be in relationship, think about some of your most important intimate relationships. There are times, aren't there, when it is unbelievably wonderful to just be with a person and not say a thing. But you're present with one another. And so I had to get to that place of being able to say, even if nothing has, quote, happened in this time that I've been quiet, I've been present with God. Sometimes I even try to visualize, Jesus sitting next to me or close to me, just as a way to sort of tangibly say, we are present with one another in a very close way. Other times, there will be simple things that will happen, like a name will come to my mind. And so I'll just kind of note that, name, and I'll try to remember to follow up then sometime later in the day. It might be an email, or it might be a phone call, and just say, hey, I was thinking about you today in my time of prayer. Hope things are well. Not forcing anything on anybody, but just thinking maybe God put that person on my mind for some reason. I don't know. Sometimes there are impressions I have. Sometimes there are ways, because I've rid myself of as much of the chaos. You know how they call it the monkey mind in the meditation traditions? We have monkey minds that just go crazy all the time. If you get to the place of being able to remove some of that, there's just thoughts or impressions that come. Now the question is, are those from God? You want me to give you the answer? I don't know. But the more you get into it, the more you kind of trust that maybe God is choosing to speak to you in that way. And so you follow up on it. And in following up on it, sometimes you figure out whether that was something from God, or whether you just had indigestion, or whether you were just thinking about a person. This is not science. This is art. It's an invitation to create a space where, trusting that God is actually present, not physically, but present in our lives in God's way, that God desires to speak to us. And that when we have these thoughts, impressions, words, people, whatever, they are actually from God. There's a psalm that we're going to be reciting a number of times a little bit later in the service called Be Still and Know That I Am God, Psalm 46:10. And the marvelous thing about that psalm is it begins with the chaos at the beginning of it. It says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in our times of trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the mountains shake, though the seas roar and foam in their tumult. You can just get the sense of the Times Square experience that somebody's having. It's just chaos in their life at the time. At the end of the psalm, it says, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Just in a few minutes, we're going to have a chance to experience that prayer with one another.
As Pastor Kai mentioned, our hope is that in this season, you'll be able to find that center, find that stillness. And Matt and I are going to play a little bit. We're going to sing a very, very simple phrase, just 3 times. Be still, be still, be still, and know. And as we sing it over and over, I hope that if you're so moved, you'll join us. And if you just want to hum along, that's perfectly fine. And if you just want the sound to wash over you, that's perfectly fine too. Be still, be still, be still, and know. Be still, be Be still, be still, be still, and know. 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 Be still, be still, be still, and know.
Now, for the next few minutes, we're just going to take that phrase, be still and know that I am God, and we're just going to project it up on the screen. There's going to be no noise other than just whatever's happening in this space. And each time the words come up, the phrase will just get a little bit shorter. And so it will end with just the word be. So be still and know that I am God will take you down to be. Be alive, be human, be the one that God has created you to be. So just take this moment and just watch the words as they come. It'll happen slowly, and just receive them for the gift that they are tonight. Gracious Holy Spirit, shape us into the image of Jesus that you long for us to be, so we can be kind like he was. We can be merciful like he was. We can be peacemakers like he was, especially in this world now ringing with war. We could be hopeful like he was. We can be sacrificial like he was. And in the end, and in all things, we could be loving as he was, is, and will always be. In his name we pray. Amen.
Come away from rush and hurry to the stillness of God's peace. From our vain ambitions worry, come to Christ to find release. Come away from noise and clamor, life's demands and frenzied pace. Come to join the people gathered here to seek and find God's face. Come then, children, with your burdens, life's confusions, fears, and pain. Leave them at the cross of Jesus. Take instead his kingdom's reign. Bring your thirst, for he will quench them. He alone will satisfy all our longings. Find attainment when to self we gladly die.
And now as you go your way this evening, be centered in God's heart. Be filled with God's hope. Be sent as God's hand of love. Thanks be to God. We'll see you on Sunday, and we'll see you next week.
He is here for the broken, life to the one who is undone. He is here to the wounded, and hope for the helpless one. Be still, my soul, be still. Be still, my soul, be still. Wait patiently upon the Lord. Be still, my soul, be still. Wait patiently upon the Wait patiently upon the Lord. Be still.